Your water is the one.
What's that?
The most important thing we can do is not mix up our water.
Yeah.
Your water's that one.
Okay. And then
So I think
what do I do when I'm not speaking?
I'm wondering if we sit there or over here. The best way to go is.
Guys are a long day today. Longer than intended. Oh yeah.
Here is your clicker.
So right here from the.
So that'll be forward, that'll be backwards. Okay,
That's it.
that's it.
I'm going to say it should be idiot-proof, but famous last words.
So it's forward and backwards.
Forward and back.
Forward and back.
Please
And
don't
if,
push any other
if
button,
you,
we're in
if you
big
do,
trouble.
then it'll be fine.
And those are the only two screens, eh?
There's 4 screens. There will be 4 screens, yeah.
Oh, there. Okay, cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me. Hopefully I didn't bumble it up too much.
Okay, if this have your attention for a moment, please. I would like to call committee to order, but we are having a technical problem with our live webcasting. So we are running late, so yeah, it's committee's decision. I would suggest we proceed with the agenda and we'll let the live web catch up to us. Does that make sense? Okay, so in that case, I'd like to call our Administration Finance Committee to order. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to declare a conflict on item 2.2. I've had a leadership position in the capital campaign for House of Friendship conversation with staff. I think it's best that I declare a conflict.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Earp. So noted on 2.2. And that also reminds me, because the system's down, we're going to have to go old school. So put your hand up to be recognized by the chair. No electronic indications, okay? All right, delegations. The first one is from St. John's Kilmarnock School, redevelopment charges. Welcome to a group. There's a group of you. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate you coming in, and you have 20 minutes as a group.
Thank you very much. I'm Carl Innanen, and I'm a parent from St. John's Kilmarnock School, and I'm also the co-chair of the Smart Arena Build Committee. And I'd like to introduce our delegation today. My other co-chair is Bob Copeland. We've got Leanne Dietrich. She's the director of athletics at the school. Kelly Paton. She's the head coach of women's hockey at Wilfrid Laurier. And then Stephen Woods, who's an SJK parent, passionate hockey player, volunteer, and also the head of Canada for a little company called Google. So we wanted to come today and share with you a very exciting project that we've been working on for some time, that we've shared with some of you in smaller groups, and we wanted to open up with an idea of what's going on with the project, how it is, and then we have an ask of you as well. So this picture is something that is an iconic picture of kids playing hockey. And these girls are playing hockey on the pond at St. John Kilmarnock School. And what we see in their faces is the joy of play and how they're having fun. But what we all know is behind the scenes, and what we're trying to accomplish with our project is beyond the play. It's about the learning, the teamwork, the leadership, as well as the physical and mental health that can come from play, sport, and particularly hockey. All of that helped to inspire one of our parents, Gordon Shembry, who's with us today. And he was inspired with an idea, and the idea was to put a hockey rink on St. John's Kilmarnock School. And even more important than that idea, as I'm sure you'll understand, was he was willing to come to the table with a donation to create that hockey rink. So that rink, our smart arena, is going to be a $7 million project, 43,000 square feet, with a single pad, which will be designed with the latest technology to record data and information and provide feedback for development to players, coaches, referees, and the medical and training staff. This cutting-edge technology will help our youth not only learn faster and better, but also safely, while developing all the life skills they'll use in their lives off the rink. The building will also have technology-connected multi-purpose rooms that can act as classroom for outdoor education during the day, be a video review room in the evening, and host high-performance coaching, refereeing, or leadership workshops on the weekends. The arena will be built on the SJK campus, but it'll be available to everyone in the region. This is truly something that's private, but open for all of the public. We all know it's really tough to get ice time, but it's even tougher to get ice time for youth programs and girls. So we're going to focus on helping them the most with this project. Something I want to emphasize here is this is a 100% privately funded project. All of the capital going into it will be funded privately, and we are taking on the operation costs as well as all operational risks. We will not come back to you with any questions about, can you help us fund this going forward? This is a private project. We are asking you, as representatives of the community, to come to the table waiving the development charges. And I'd like to let you know right now, we've had a discussion with Mayor Shantz, who's already pledged that Woolwich will waive the township portion of about $88,000 of the development charges. So we're asking you to follow suit and follow her lead and waive the about $265,000 of development charges. And this is a one-time ask. And we only ask this based on the unique ability of this project to benefit the greater regional community. Thank you. Now Bob will speak to those greater community benefits.
All right, thanks, Carl. Welcome, Bob.
Hi, thanks for having us today. I just wanted to speak about the case for the waiver of the DCs, further to what Carl has talked to you about. So as mentioned, this is a one-time ask, and it's based on the unique elements that differentiate this project. In respect to the DCs, all major services are on site, so there's no need for city gas, water, sewage, or storm. So we estimate these development costs, which are being paid by Mr. Chambry as part of our contribution, his contribution, SJK's contribution, of about $680,000, which far exceeds the value of the DC we are seeking at $265,000. So this is also, in terms of the case for this waiver, it's an issue of not having to pay twice or not having our donor to have to pay in order to make a $7 million donation. First and foremost, this is a public facility. SJK is an independent, not-for-profit school, although frequently referred to as a private school. Public facility, but as Carl mentioned, no investment financial risk to the region, and we estimate 85% of capacity is for public non-school use. 100% privately funded has been mentioned, no capital infrastructure required. This is also, there's some very important, we feel, opportunities if you're able to assist us with our request. This is aligned with federal government gender equity mandate. Minister Kirsty Duncan has made some announcement recently with respect to gender equity initiatives. So we feel there's some tremendous opportunities for potential funding based on the unique attributes of this program. This is aligned with the Smart Cities narrative, and I know everybody's very excited about that announcement in a few weeks. I'll speak to that in a moment. Tournament economic impacts, I think you guys are all well aware of how tournaments can help a region and a municipality. We estimate direct tournament impacts of about $300,000. We'll also engage Hockey Canada in their women's program for development camps and training camps at the arena, particularly because of the focus on girls' sport. And that will undoubtedly bring economic benefits and perhaps more importantly, a positive narrative for the region. And finally, we really do feel quite passionately that this is the right thing to do for all of these reasons. This was in your package. I'll just give you another 20 seconds to read it again. So I think it does speak for itself, but just a little backstory on this. So Danielle Sauvageau is an internationally recognized coach for Team Canada, won a gold medal at the 2002 Olympics in Salt Lake City. A very passionate Canadian, could have gone south for a lot more money, but she is driving women's hockey in Canada. She's currently a coach at the University of Montreal. And when I had the opportunity to speak with her about this project, she stopped me on the phone and she talked about getting goosebumps and said that this was actually part of Hockey Canada's original mandate, this kind of best practice youth, women's focused arena. So in my last 2 minutes, I just want to close and talking about the impact that this waiver will provide the project. So the waiver of the DC will allow us to create a truly differentiated arena aligned with the regional narrative of innovation, teaching, and leadership, rather than simply a 42,000 square foot pad of ice. But we need your waiver of the DCs to accomplish this vision. The waiver will create opportunities for us to work with two leading hockey companies doing business in Waterloo, Hockey Tech and Athletica Sports Systems. And Carl has already spoken to some of that technology and what a smart complex means and how it will transform this complex. Finally, in reference to the Smart Cities Challenge, which all of you are well aware, more versed than I am, but I do know that it's about creating a platform for bold ideas, and we think the approach with this complex is a bold idea consistent with the Smart Cities Challenge, in particular, empowering communities to innovate, forging new partnerships and networks, and spreading benefits to all Canadians. Not only will this help our local community in terms of capacity and ice time and all the attributes Carl mentioned, but it will be a model of best practice in serving women's sport. Danielle Sauvageau actually spoke to this as being something in Hockey Canada's planning for a women's program. But I guess, and going back over a decade, but I guess nobody had a bold enough vision and the resources to pull it off. And we have such an opportunity before us with your support. And I'll turn it back over to Carl.
Thanks, Bob. If I were going to replace this slide with a picture, the picture I would choose is another iconic picture, just like the picture of kids playing hockey. This one would be, in this area, a barn raising. Because that's what we're doing here. We're bringing together many different groups to make sure that what we have in the end is more than just the sum of the parts. Sorry. So we're going to be bringing together the private side, a donor bringing money to the table, bring SJK together, bring the region, the township, and then aspirational partners as well. What's SJK bringing to the table? We're donating the land, which the market value is about $1.8 million. We are going to pay for all the infrastructure costs on site. So the balance of that has been estimated at $680,000. This is, as we've mentioned, a fully private funded project with no operational risk going forward. And what we're asking from the community partners, from the township, they've pledged that they will forgive the township development charges of $88,000. We've gotten Gordon Shembry coming to the table with the ability to build an $7 million rink. And we've got Hockey Tech and Athletica as partners going forward, bring technology into the arena and making it a smart arena. And what we ask of you as the region is to forgive the development charges of that $265,000 to allow us to create this wonderful piece of regional infrastructure to be used by everyone at the cost of the private donor as well as SJK. In the future, we believe with the high performance center that this is going to become, that Hockey Canada would be attracted to this, and we may even see some investment from the federal and provincial government. So with that, I'll leave you with this final slide, which is a quote from Ian Klugman, who I'm sure you're all familiar with at Communitech, and we really believe that a smart arena like this could become the Communitech or the technology hub for sport and hockey in our region. Thank you very much, and I'll call on our delegates, starting with Leanne Dietrich, who is the Director of Athletics at St. John's Kilmarnock.
Okay, welcome, Leanne.
Oops. Thank you for having me. So again, my name is Leanne Dietrich. I'm the Director of Athletics at St. John's Kilmarnock School. And just wanted to tell you, I guess, a little bit about myself and my own experiences in sport, and then how it's all connected to this presentation today. So I grew up on a farm in southwestern Ontario, and girls hockey was not yet an option in that area in those days, back in the 70s. That being said, my brother and I used to get very excited to play on the patches of ice that would form out in the plowed fields. We didn't have great drainage where I came from, so that happened once in a while. When I got to high school, there was still not a hockey team to play for, but field hockey was a really big thing there at that school. And I gave it a try, and I fell in love with the game. I went on to enjoy 5 years of the sport in high school, and we won an OFSA championship in grade 13. I played for 4 years at the University of Waterloo, and then I went on to play and coach provincially, and then coached at Western for 3 years while I was completing my B.Ed and M.Ed degrees there. I got hired at SJK to teach phys ed and coach field hockey, though I didn't have a phys ed degree. And I think Judy McRae at the University of Waterloo might have put in a good word for me on the field hockey front, so I'm very indebted to her for that. At any rate, I ended up at SJK, became the athletic director 3 years in, and I've been there now teaching and coaching field hockey, volleyball, and soccer for 20 years. During that time, we've enjoyed some great athletic successes, including 5 OFSA championships, a silver, bronze, and an antique bronze, all in field hockey. We've also traveled to Ireland, Scotland, Australia, Hong Kong, Germany, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, New Zealand, and to the U.S. National Team Training Center in Mannheim, Pennsylvania. To say that sport has been transformational for me, a shy and quiet farm kid, would be a huge understatement. It has opened many doors, taken me to wonderful places, afforded me growth opportunities beyond measure, and quite frankly, dictated my journey through life thus far. This proposed arena facility can help us as coaches and educators to support many of the young people of our region to embrace similar growth opportunities. In short, this project is good for our youth. Our coaching philosophy at SJK is focused on building authentic relationships with the athletes we coach, actively engaging them in both decision-making and problem-solving, and giving them genuine ownership and investment in the team. Partnering this philosophy with cutting-edge facilities will help us to continue to refine what has proven thus far to be a successful approach to developing young athletes. Indeed, many SJK student athletes have gone on to play at the university level, 37 in field hockey alone, but 25% of them have been appointed as captains of those teams at the university level, which is pretty okay, I think you'd agree. 9 field hockey players and 1 basketball player. Further to this, as you are no doubt aware, the federal government is developing a code of conduct for sport in Canada and a gender equity secretariat to address abuse, harassment, and discrimination in sport. Having greater participation of women in leadership roles, coaching and officiating would also contribute significantly to greater safety in sport. The proposed arena is also a great way to connect SJK and Waterloo region in general. We currently rent out our gym and fields to a variety of local youth and adult sports groups, ranging from soccer, basketball, indoor hockey and volleyball, to ultimate frisbee, wrestling, martial arts, and dodgeball. The gym has consistently been booked 5 nights a week since the doors opened in 2001, and the fields are booked 5 days a week throughout the summer. If the proposed arena build comes to fruition, more than 84% of the ice time available will likewise go to support programming for local leagues and teams. The proposed arena complex is a great opportunity to further SJK's strong relationships with Waterloo region. This is truly a once-in-a-career opportunity for me and one that I'm very excited about. Thank you.
Thanks, Leanne. I'd now like to call on Stephen Woods.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you. I'm here as a parent, but ultimately as a small-town kid from Saskatchewan who grew up loving sport and technology. I'm a Waterloo supporter since I moved here in 1988 for the first time. I'm a University of Waterloo graduate and a past varsity athlete at the University of Waterloo. I'm here also as a Googler and a Canadian technology leader and a constant advocate for the region and all things of Waterloo region. Particularly, I came and remain here because of the barn-raising philosophy that permeates the community in helping us all build a better place to live and raise our children. I've been a volunteer in minor girls hockey for the past 8 years. I'm currently the director of representative hockey for Waterloo's girls hockey program. I recently launched the high performance training program for the Waterloo girls hockey program for AA hockey in Waterloo. I feel this project represents an amazing opportunity to create a center for girls hockey excellence, and I'm very excited to be advising on all aspects of technology and facilities design in partnership with Hockey Tech and other local companies in creating a truly state-of-the-art community, bridging sport and technology. It's very exciting that this is happening here. I invite the region to join this partnership with our volunteers, our volunteer companies, in advancing youth education, sport, and leadership development in our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And our last delegate, Kelly Paton, the head coach for the women's hockey team at Wilfrid Laurier.
Okay. Welcome, Kelly. And just so you know, you are at your 20 minutes, so no pressure, Kelly. But,
I'll be quick, don't worry.
You're used to operating in a high-stress environment, so I'm sure you'll do fine.
No, yeah. I appreciate your time, and I'll be quick. Bob had originally just contacted me to speak on behalf of a member of the local hockey community and somebody that has been involved with Hockey Canada in previous events. And I just feel there's a lot of positive and unique aspects of this project that could have a really positive effect on female in sport, in this case in hockey as well. And it could really stimulate partnerships with Hockey Canada, but also at the provincial level with the OWHA. And obviously with us being local with Wilfrid Laurier and the University of Waterloo, create some mentorship opportunities with our student athletes through their involvement. And then just with the smart technology of the facility, really generate some unique data that I think will put us ahead of the curve in sport in today's world. Thank you.
Very well done. Thanks very much, Kelly. Carl, you want a final wrap-up comment?
Thank you very much. I appreciate you indulging with a little extra time. And we are very excited and passionate about this project. Hopefully that came across in our presentation. And if you have any further questions or anything else that we can help you with, we would be more than happy to do that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. There may be some questions from committee, but just a couple of things before we get into the questions. You'll notice that there isn't a staff report attached to the delegation. And for development charges and waiver development charges, as my colleagues are aware, that's a major policy decision for the region of Waterloo. We don't generally waive development charges. And so what I'm going to suggest once the questions are completed with the delegations is that we refer this back to staff for subsequent report to come back either to the council meeting next week or to the A&F committee meeting later in May. But I would suggest that we deal with it expeditiously and have it come back to council next week. So before we turn it over to questions, I'd also like to remind everyone that we're going with hands. Because Karen, you were out of the room. There was the system's down. Oh. But you were first because your red light came on first. So I'll recognize Chair Redmond and then Councillor Clark. Okay. Then I had Kiefer, Shantz, and then McGarry. Okay, Chair Redmond.
Thank you very much, and I do apologize if some of my questions were answered by the delegation beforehand. I would be prepared to move the referral to staff as well.
Okay.
When it's appropriate. Who's going to own and operate the facility once it's up and running?
So it'd be owned and operated by St. John's Kilmarnock.
And you made a differentiation between a not-for-profit school and a private school. Can you explain to us what the difference is? Because we don't waive fees. You need to know that development charges do get paid out of another fund, but they do have to be paid. So we don't waive them, we grant them. So what's the difference? And we don't grant development charge relief to private schools. So what's the difference between a not-for-profit school and a private school?
So I'd like to call on Ian Watt, the interim head of school, to answer that question.
Hi. So the distinction is significant, but not well understood. So your question makes a lot of sense. St. John's Kilmarnock School is defined as an independent school. We are a not-for-profit charitable organization. We are operated by management and run by teachers, but we are governed by an arm's-length third-party board of governors that's comprised of volunteers. So there is no profit motive to the operation of a school such as SJK. Schools that are not publicly funded are generally often, and it makes sense simplistically, are often put in the same bucket, just considered to be private schools. But private schools are actually different in kind than independent schools because private schools operate for profit. And we are, our CFO can tell you, we are truly not for profit. We are almost too good at that. So we sort of zero out on our budget on an annual basis. There is no profit, there is no profit sharing.
But students pay fees, families pay fees for students to attend St. John's.
That's correct.
Okay. I have two more questions, if I could. The coach, and I'm sorry I'm forgetting your name, but you talked about the public use of the fields, and that's great. You say you rent them, so I'm assuming that the availability of this facility to other groups would be on a rental basis. Is that consistent with the business plan? And you don't have to answer it, sorry. I don't know if any of you gentlemen want to.
That is consistent with the business plan. There will be a small portion that would be, and we haven't gotten that deep into the business plan as to what portion of that would be without cost.
And my final question is, and you must have turned your thoughts to this, what happens to this proposal, which I have to tell you is very exciting, and you are sharing your enthusiasm for it. What happens if you don't get the answer you're seeking vis-a-vis the development charges and the payment of them?
Quite frankly, we don't think it's going to go forward, and that's why we hesitate. This is a very important piece of the puzzle for us, and this waiver or the granting of the development charges, I think is something that's vitally important to it going forward.
It's interesting that you have so many generous partners and that St. John's is willing to step up. Have you considered whether or not you could fundraise that equal amount?
We have looked at that, and quite frankly, I would suggest that if I were to give you an investment, that if you made an investment of $265,000 to get a $7 million piece of infrastructure in the region, that a lot of people would say that is a just and good investment. That's quite frankly how we look at it.
Well, I'll look forward to the staff report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Redmond. And I'm just wondering, Mr. Dyer, Treasurer, if you could just clarify how development funds granted are actually funded. So if we agree to waive development charges, they have to be funded. Where are they funded from?
In response, Mr. Chair, the region has a development charges bylaw that imposes these charges on development throughout the region. There are specific rules within that development charge bylaw which determine when and how they apply. If an exemption is granted by council, then the Act requires the municipality, the region in this case, to make the development charge reserve balance whole. In other words, we need to fund the amount that's granted, and we would, the only other source would be through both existing property tax and water customers.
Okay. Thank you. So existing property tax and user rates, essentially. All right. Councillor Clark. You have to turn it on. I have no capacity to do.
This question actually is probably for Mr. Dyer, and if you'd prefer to wait till you bring back the staff report, that's fine. I know that we haven't got a precedent of granting development charge waivers to schools, but I'm wondering what our precedent might be for community recreation facilities, assuming the 85%. So the question is, what has been our past practice with requests of this sort?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So the region's past practice with respect to both private schools and I'll call it, community organizations is that development undertaken by those groups is not exempt from development charges, and development charges are paid.
So I would suggest when the report comes back that there would be a list. It's very small of where we previously granted development charges exemptions. Okay. Councillor Kiefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to wait for the report as well, but thank you for the presentation. And Carl, I've met with you before on this particular subject, as I have with Mr. Chambry, and it's a very exciting project, as has been stated. Chair Redmond asked some of the questions I was going to ask, but I just wanted to make a comment about the fact that it is a great opportunity, and everybody knows in this room that female hockey has really started to gel and excel. And in this region, we're blessed. I mean, we go back to the early 1900s and look at the Preston Rivulets, who won 10 Dominion championships, and that was a female hockey team back when. And I believe there's a play coming through Drayton Theatre called Glory, where they're being featured. But aside from that, I think this is a great opportunity, or would be a great opportunity to move forward. However, as you heard, we need to listen to the report and find out what's going on with the development. But thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I have Councillor Shantz, McGarry, Harris, and Urbanovic. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you, and thank you for coming and for your presentation. A number of my questions have been answered. I think this is a really exciting project. I think it can benefit the region, access to a facility like this by the cities. It's close to the cities, it's close to the township. I guess I would ask also in the staff report, can we talk about partnerships and when we, how we consider partnerships? Because I think their ask is more, can you partner with us in some way on this project? A $7 million facility that they're asking for a small investment in. So if that could be part of the staff report, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McGarry.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Bob, I think it was you that mentioned in your remarks that you were looking at an annual benefit of $300,000. Is that an annual benefit, and would that be for the sport hosting capacity of this centre?
Yes, that would be an annual benefit. And, I mean, it is an estimate based on academic published studies, and that's based on, that actually is a low-end estimate based on 5 teams, or 5 levels, 8 teams. So we're estimating about 1,600 people with an average spend of $200. Just also in response to that question, just to help you appreciate the opportunity, and I know $265,000 is a lot of money, but when we look at the long-term economic benefit to the region, we think it's profound. And this is just a very short excerpt from a Traverse City area in Michigan, economic impact, and I'm just going to read this to you. It says, many advocates agree that regional economies benefit hosting youth tournaments. In an article for the Journal of Global Business Management, authors write that youth and amateur sports tournaments are fairly low investment opportunities that small communities can explore with large returns for the resources that are already present. In fact, attendees at a recent meeting of the National Association of Sports Commissions quoted returns on investments as high as 50 to 1.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McGarry. Councillor Harris? Well, I'm okay with that, but I don't think Councillor Banovic is, because he's next.
I'm okay with it.
Okay, so he's okay with it? We're all okay with it? Councillor Galloway?
Are you expecting something profound? Well, I think this is a terrific project, and congratulations to the whole group for putting this together. It's a difficult fit for us, however, because first of all, we're not in charge of recreation. That's a lower tier responsibility. And, but I first want to give you a little bit of context. First of all, one of my daughters played varsity hockey for the Golden Hawks. She played with Cheryl Pounder, so she wasn't nearly as good as Cheryl, but Cheryl was on the national team, of course. But back in the day, we ran around with the Golden Hawks. On the last 3 days, I was at the North Dumfries Community Center, the Shade Street Arena, and Sports World Arena, following my granddaughter around. She tries out for she's made the team, the Lady Rangers. So, sorry, Stephen, but the Lady Rangers are a good organization too. And of course, I've been involved with the Kitchener Rangers for 51 years. So I understand hockey, and I understand its value. I understand what you're trying to do here, and to have a center of excellence like this, particularly for female hockey, would be just a great thing to have. But it's a difficult fit. And so my first question is, why are you asking for a waiving of the fees as opposed to a grant? Waiving the fees is so difficult for us. And in fact, we don't waive fees, as Chair Redmond indicated. We can only, we have to pay for them. The taxpayer has to pay for them. Indeed, a grant is coming from the same pocket as well. But it's, there's such precedence. There's so many people looking for exemptions to development charges that we have consistently said no to. It seems to me you were ill-advised to ask for a waiving of the fees. So I'm curious, first of all, why you're asking for that as opposed to some other way we could support you.
You might be absolutely right. We might have been ill-advised going down this road. We thought that was the straight road. We didn't look at other avenues.
The record here is very clear. Our record is very clear. We do not exempt. and that's been a very consistent record over the years. We found other ways to support organizations. We found other ways to provide assistance. But, and maybe there'll be an exception made on this particular occasion because ultimately it'll be a political decision.
Sorry, just further to that point, there is some context, and it may or may not be germane to this particular regional council, but there are examples of schools across the province, independent schools, like us, member schools of the Conference of Independent Schools and Canadian Accredited Independent Schools, who have received deferrals or exemptions, waivers in their construction of various facilities. So
we're quite aware of that.
Okay, so
our bylaw simply does not allow it, and we've been pretty firm on that. And yeah, those exceptions have been quoted to us on many occasions. So we're quite aware of that.
Well, that was our context, but we're certainly open to your creativity.
I guess I'm curious also to what assurance, like, is there an agreement that the township is going to be entering into? Because the township is responsible for recreation. We're not responsible for recreation or for sport per se. Will there be an agreement that X amount of time or whatever facility use is going to be guaranteed to the broader community as opposed to the Center of Excellence, which is a great thing, or to the school itself?
We have had those discussions. We've talked about creating opportunities similar to a Tim Hortons free skate in the local and regional community, sponsored by additional businesses in our community to provide that type of access. So yes, those, we don't have specifics, but those have been discussed, and those would be part of our process moving forward.
So Bob, you and I work together at the university, so I'm a bit of a facilities guy, as you know, coming out of plant operations at the University of Waterloo. So we built and maintained the Columbia ice fields, and I'm retired now, so I don't have to worry about those things anymore. But I'm wondering to what extent the construction of the facility is going to endear itself to community use. Like, what are some of the amenities, dressing rooms, and so on that would endear itself to community use?
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the Columbia Ice Field, because that's quite an antiquated arena, and this will be the polar opposite. We will have fully accessible change rooms. We will have a state-of-the-art training area. So even beyond hockey, other youth sports teams will have an opportunity to take advantage of that, and other groups that want to come in. And again, the real core of the SMART complex is the technology, the teaching, embedded sensors, video, so that we can track and monitor players for a variety of reasons, whether it's skill development or safety and concussions. So hopefully that answers your question. We want to let the community know that this is open for them, not only locally, but provincially and nationally. And we feel that, given this focus on technology and our links with Hockey Canada, the discussions we have, that we will draw people nationally to this facility. And yes, we did work a lot together, Tom, and I really enjoyed that time. We're not fortunate as the University of Waterloo or Laurier is to not have to pay these DCs. We issue charitable tax receipts just like those institutions do. We are not for profit. And just the final point in response to Ms. Redmond's comment about being an independent, not-for-profit school, just to give you a point of comparison, the parents do pay a lot of money for their children to come to the school. And Mr. Chambry is a great example of giving back for the benefit of the entire community. And the last statistic I'll leave you is the endowment at St. John's Kilmarnock School is $35,000. And when you compare and contrast that with, let's say, Upper Canada College in Toronto, their endowment is $100 million. So although $265,000 might seem like, let's just go out and get another donor, you know, we feel that based on the unique attributes of the project, we understand the discussions and the notion of precedent. Again, to Carl's point, this would be an incredible precedent to set if there are other people who would like to donate $7 million to make this happen. But we'll seek your counsel and any other avenues moving forward to make this project happen.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harris and Councillor
Just
Urbanovic.
one I just wanted to say I support the what might be the recommendation to refer to staff, and when that comes up, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Harris?
Well,
Yeah, turn it on.
I'll just assume it's on. I'll echo, obviously, the sentiments about the excitement on the project. I had the opportunity to come out and hear firsthand, walk through it a bit more in detail. So I'll leave that stand as is. I wondered if you could perhaps expand on the $680,000 in indirect infrastructure costs, just kind of, for our sake, what those would be. It was mentioned in your slide deck that would not be borne by the region and be incurred by the project. I believe that was what the slide suggested. What makes up those $680,000?
That's an estimate based on the planner who's done the plans and estimates for the building, and that would include water, sewer, we're on septic, all of those things that we have to develop locally with the project. I can provide additional detail, I just don't have it for this presentation.
Okay, thanks. So Councillor Urbanovic is our last speaker, then I have a question, then we'll deal with the referral. Councillor Urbanovic?
Thank you. First of all, I too want to thank you all for coming in, and Mr. Shembri for the offer that has been put on the table, and for the creative thinking that's been put together to really look at this as a great idea for our community. And while I certainly, we all in this business need to be concerned around precedent, I also think that it is an exciting precedent, as you suggested, to see that kind of donation and being leveraged with some sort of what really is a small contribution in my mind, both from the region and the city, or from the township rather, towards this initiative. Question is, how do we get there? My one question, and this may be part of the answer to that, is right now, as a independent school, do you pay any property taxes, or are you totally exempt?
We're exempt.
And so this property as well would continue to be part of that exemption? Okay, then this potential avenue of solution doesn't work as a possible option. But I do think one of the avenues that we should be exploring as staff looks at this is the economic development piece of it. Because, there's increasingly a lot of work being done in this area around sport technology, particularly hockey technology. And as we've made investments in other sectors through not-for-profits like Communitech and Velocity and Accelerator Center, and so on, I think we can be looking at it in that context, and the fact that it'll really be providing a testing ground for these technologies going forward, which ultimately will grow our tech and innovation sector, create jobs in the community, and so on, notwithstanding all of the sport tourism angles and everything else that's been talked about. So hopefully that can be explored. It's again, it would take a different approach, because it would be, a grant or a contribution towards that aspect of things. But it is another way of looking at it, I think, as we pursue it. I'm hopeful that staff will come up with a recommendation, because ultimately, I personally am regardless of that report, I'm supportive of seeing this move forward, and I think what we need to do is just figure out how to make it happen.
Thank you. I just wanted, your question about the taxes, I just wanted very briefly Ian to comment on that.
We do have roughly 400 students at the school, representing about 320 families in our catchment area, which would be about 280 families in the immediate Waterloo region. So our families are, of course, paying their property taxes and funding publicly funded education, either the public system or the separate system, and then paying tuition on top of that. But we just wanted to make the point that we do have hundreds of families who are paying property tax to Waterloo region.
No, and I appreciate that, as do other families. And where I was going with it is there is a mechanism, I understand, in the property tax regime where we can get into a scenario where a private sector company actually can have property taxes exempted for a period of time, and at the end of, I forget if it's 25 or 50 years or something, the property or the facility actually turns over to the municipality, but in the meantime, you're exempt from property tax, but that's not relevant in this instance.
Thank you.
Okay. No further speakers. So, Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to be clear on the funding, and I think the answers have come forward during the presentation. But basically, there's three funders currently: the township with the development fee, St. John's putting in the land, and the private donor. And so there's been no public fundraising, no fundraising amongst the parents, the supporting community. And there would be, the fourth partner would be the region then. Correct. Thank you.
All right, that's the end of speakers, and I'd like to thank you for coming in and echo my colleagues' comments about how exciting a project this is, and they've done an effective job reaching out to many of us, obviously from the caliber of the discussion, the familiarity with the project. And I had a conversation with Bob, and I shared with him two of the main points is that the region doesn't fund recreation, and it's very rare for us to grant an exemption. So, you know, despite that, they're still here today. So they're very committed to the project, obviously, and it's a very worthwhile project. But my question is, Bob, to you and to your group, is that I don't understand. I think it's fantastic for such a philanthropic gift to come forward to the school. But why is it contingent on having these development charges exempted? We've had lots of examples of philanthropic gifts, you know, Perimeter Institute, SIGI, for example. There's probably numerous others where we've never had to deal with this kind of request. So I'm just curious as to why this gift, which is very generous and very much appreciated, is linked to an exemption for development charges. It doesn't make sense to me.
Happy to answer that question. Two reasons. One, philosophical. Our donor, and we concur with him, doesn't feel that he should have to pay $265,000 to allow him to make a $7 million donation. So irrespective of capacity, that's a philosophical issue. And then secondly, it's an issue of fairness. The fact, and again, to compare with the CGs and the Perimeter Institutes, this project, again, is unique and it's differentiated in the fact that all of the services that would be required are being paid for directly because of the unique geography of the school. So all the services are being borne by Mr. Chambry's donation. So it's the notion of fairness, and you know, why should Mr. Chambry's hard-earned money why should he have to pay twice? So that would be my answer to that question.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sean, can I ask just one?
Sorry?
Can I ask just one?
Well, we haven't had an opportunity. I'll allow a question, Councillor Fox, and then we'll move to the referral. So just in terms of follow-up to Mr. Copeland, I appreciate that response, and I know it was a difficult question, but I felt that it needed to be asked, and I appreciate your response. Councillor Fox.
Just out of curiosity, and I have a recreation background, and I did play hockey in the 1970s on an all-women's team and played for a number of years, but besides that. So I'm from North Dumfries. We have a $16 million sports complex. We're looking just to do an add-on on a second ice pad. The base start is $8 million. So I find if you can, we'll be talking to you. If you can really do this for $7 million, we'll be talking to you.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that, and I understand that. And the person you should probably speak to is Mr. Chambry, because in addition to making the donation, he is going to build the project. So he enjoys economies of scale, and what would typically be, I'll give you an example. We went on a site visit to St. Andrew's College, and I might be off a little bit, team, but I believe that build was $15 or $17 million. And Gordon, his planner, and a lot of people were scratching their heads because they couldn't figure out where the $17 million went. So as my colleagues have alluded to, we're a not-for-profit, we're very good at it, and we'll get every last penny out of a state-of-the-art facility.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes our questions, and thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
It's in the committee's hands now, and I'll ask Chairman Redmond to bring forward that motion.
Thank you, Chair Strickland, and I want to thank the delegation for your candor and your clarification. I would move that this issue be referred to staff, and I'm going to ask staff if it's possible to come back maybe on May 8th, just because I think we've got a lot of clarity over the ask. I think we've been very candid with the delegation, and they've heard the limitations to their ask and asking for an exemption at this point in time. So I would move it asking that it could come back May 8th.
All right.
Subject to staff is saying yes.
Okay, and staff is nodding. So we have a seconder for that, Councillor Galloway? Yeah. Councillor Galloway indicated earlier that he would second that. Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. None opposed. All right. Thanks very much. You'll have your final answer May 8th.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, moving on. John Neufeld from House of Friendship. Welcome, John. Thanks for your patience. We appreciate you being here.
Good afternoon, Chair Strickland, regional councillors, regional staff. Thank you for having me this, I was going to say morning, but I have to adjust that afternoon. It's been a tough time for all of you around this table. You know this better than anyone else. And one of the casualties, I think, of when a community is struggling with many things, in particular things like the opioid crisis right now, is some of the great things that are happening in the community kind of get lost or overlooked. And so I just want to take a few minutes and maybe share two really great stories of things that are happening in Waterloo region. And it's tied in with a staff report that is in your package. Just for those of you, we've got a few councillors new around the table, just unfamiliar with House of Friendship. I just want to bring you back 80 years to the Great Depression when the whole world was struggling. Here, right in our own region, was a small group of women coming around a table trying to figure out what to do with the realities of homelessness. And they could have continued to sit around a table and think about it, talk about it. Instead, they jumped into action and started providing a meal for the gentlemen on our streets. 80 years later, we've gone from serving 6 gentlemen to about 42,000 people across all of Waterloo region and every part of it, predominantly in 4 areas of addiction treatment, food distribution, supportive housing, and neighborhood work. And I'm pleased to say, thanks to the region of Waterloo, we have team members in every neighborhood of Waterloo region working with families struggling with poverty. So, before, I know this is a finance committee, and I promise you I will talk big money, I will talk about buildings, I will satisfy that craving, but I need to be clear about the why I'm here and the why we're building the Addiction Treatment Center in Cambridge. Damien has graciously shared his story publicly. It's on our website. You could listen to it. But I want to talk about Eileen, his dear wife, who dropped him off at the doors of our addiction treatment facility 10 years ago. She had grown up in a home filled with addiction and was used to chaos, and now she had her own family and was watching her young daughters grow up with it. Dropped Damien off and said, he's your problem now. I can't deal with this anymore. And what was fascinating at the groundbreaking for the treatment facility in Cambridge, it was Eileen that spoke, not Damien, and she said the last 10 years have been the best 10 years of her life, and she's got her family back and able to raise her kids. And so I just want to be clear that the issues we're talking about and the treatment, there are real families, real faces to this, so I just wanted to add that. So why are we here? Why are we building this new addiction treatment facility? So in 1975, a group of innovative folks came together and said we need to start addressing the issue of addiction in Waterloo region. We got an old farmhouse that was a great idea in 1975. The challenge of it 45 years later is it is smack dab in the middle of a bunch of high-rises. That parking lot space is the only outdoor space for all the gentlemen there. The actual facility doesn't even facilitate the 15-bed license that we have from the province, so only 10 of the individuals can stay in that building. 5 have to go to another building. And it's also centrally located in everyone's favorite St. Patrick's Day party, which might not be the greatest place for an addiction treatment facility to be located. If I asked any of you around this horseshoe to bring your son, your uncle, your mother to that facility for any other health issue, you would not be happy with me. But because it's for addictions, for some reason, there's a mentality that, well, it's better than nothing. And we don't believe that, and I don't think this community believes that, and we knew we could do better. So we started on that journey about 3 years ago when this building became available through Women's Crisis Service when they built a new Haven House. We purchased this building just as we did in Kitchener in 2011 when they built a new Anselma House, and we turned Anselma House into a women's residential addiction treatment facility. We bought this 3 years ago, launched a $2 million capital campaign. Everything was going along well, had designs to renovate the complete insides to meet the needs of the people we were going to serve. Plans are also great, but you have to plan for the future, and you have to look at the needs of the community. And as the opioid crisis kind of continues to grow and rise, we almost had the contractor, we were about to put the shovel in the ground, and we had a hard reconsideration and saying, how are we building for the future? How are we addressing the community's needs? And made a very difficult decision to expand the build. Went to our friends at the City of Cambridge. We couldn't do much with the footprint, but we could go up, which is awesome. So I just want to go through this. This is my favorite part of the presentation, is doing that. And that's a lot of fun for me to do and really easy with 2 clicks here. The problem with it is I was about an additional 1.5 million overnight, and that was never part of the plan, but it was the right thing to do for the community. And you can't go back to the donors and say, hey, I know we asked for 2 million, we're just kidding. We actually need way more. So at the time, thankfully, what do you do? You got to do this. It's the need in the community. So you do what any, respectful not-for-profit in the community does. You go to Bay Street, and because that's where all the money is, right? We kind of did that, but not totally. Thanks to some great folks in the Barn Raiser Council, Kitchener-Waterloo Community Foundation said, we'd like you to think about social impact investing. I don't have a lot of time to explain what social impact investing is. Many of you probably know a little bit about it. We had no clue what we were doing, and I was pretty clear we never got into this work to go on Bay Street, but here we go. It was the right thing to do for the people we serve. Thanks to the Kitchener-Waterloo Community Foundation, who gave us funding to hire Mars out of Toronto that actually has a social venture exchange for people to invest in projects. So we ventured into this knowing that it's not really been done in the community before. And we were willing to be a guinea pig because we think there's so many other needs in this community and that this might be a great avenue to finance future projects, maybe like supportive housing and other things. So what is a community bond? So what's the benefit both ways? So it allows people to invest their capital that they would in traditional markets to invest in something that's going to benefit the community. Yes, they will probably get lower returns. However, they know that they're benefiting the community. Vice versa to us, we're getting access to capital at a lower market rate. So it's a sort of a win-win opportunity. And it introduces us to great community builders that we might not have been aware of in the community. So we went forward. Setting it all up took a lot of time. There is a case study that's being written up about it by the Kitchener-Waterloo Community Foundation that will be publicly available so that any not-for-profit or anyone that wants to do social impact investing can learn from all of our mistakes is essentially actually what that case study is. And hopefully for benefit. There was a handout that was given to you that was actually not included in the staff report. I'm not going to draw a lot of attention to it, but basically we went out to the community and saying, here's kind of the impact you will have. We need to raise $1 million in financing. We're looking for a minimum of $100,000 investment. And so we were looking for about 10 people. Because this was the first time we had done this, we wanted to do it well, so we didn't just open it up to everyone. We didn't just open it up to any amount. So it was done very efficiently, let's just say that. We did host an event where we presented kind of the opportunity for some investors in our community. And thanks again to the Community Foundation's help with that. And we didn't know where this was going to land. Were people in our community going to be interested in community bonds? Is this really the way of the future for investing? So we were quite nervous, and the building was getting built, and we needed money. So we had, but we in the end had a problem that we never actually ever anticipated. We actually had too many people interested in the community bond. It actually closes today. I'm happy to report that we did cap it off at $1.2 million. So it's a great lesson for us that there's a lot of interest in this kind of investing in the community and to have it as a possible vehicle to fund other ambitious projects that our community needs. So just to be clear though, I know this sounds really exciting and oversubscription and $1.2 million, but we actually have to pay it back. So I just wanted to, just in case you thought this was a donation, so that's the not so good part of the story. But we do have 6 years to pay back the investment of these donors. They were offered a community bond for 6 years at a 4% interest rate of return. Which was what was kind of recommended to us by our friends at Mars, so that's what's going. Just in conclusion, where's the building at today? Thankfully, my dear daughter needed to go shopping in Cambridge last night, so for your benefit, I drove by and took the most up-to-date recent picture I could for you. So we're getting there. We'll be up this summer. We will be opening the doors there this summer. It's going well. I want to do a special thank you to Chair. I'm going to call you Mayor, which I know I'm not supposed to be calling you that, but McGarry, Councillor Kiefer, we met years ago, and Helen Jowett, just for the support that we've received in Cambridge. I know it has not been easy, and as soon as someone says the word addiction, people get jumpy, and it's safe injection sites and all that kind of stuff. But I just want to say we're moving in the right direction. Years ago when I first came to this community, we had 2 rundown treatment facilities in our community. Now, by this summer, we're going to have great addiction treatment facilities. We have way more through the LIN and others funding for programs. We have a long way to go. But we're moving in the right direction. So I wanted to thank everyone around this table for moving us forward in a very difficult time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Just before I turn over to committee, you notice from the report that there is no recommendation, but on page 8, there's a potential resolution. Your ask is $150,000, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Chair Redmond?
Thank you. I just asked to get on the list. I didn't know I was going to be first. I would be really happy to move the recommendation as written, and also be very happy to defer to Cambridge colleagues too. John, you seem like the little engine that could. I mean, this is so fantastic. It directly aligns with what the region's responsibilities are, what we're about. I thank you for coming to us. The partnership is very impressive, and the fact that you've gone into the social impact investing, I'm sure that you will be on the speaker circuit to all the other not-for-profits, because it is the way of the future and something that in my Habitat days we looked at tapping into. So congratulations on the partnerships that you've formed and the fact that you're still breaking new ground. And this is such a wonderful project. I thought it was a lot more fun when you popped it up and down, to be honest. But it makes perfect sense to, it sort of harkens back to probably all of our Mennonite roots, where you're doing the best resolution to a complex problem in the most economical way. So thank you very much for this. And I would be happy to move the resolution unless...
Okay. And Councillor McGarry, you would second it? Okay. So typically we have the resolution when the delegation is still not at the podium, but we can be fluid here, I suppose. I'll just put the resolution that's on the floor, but we won't deal with it right away, to give council members an opportunity to ask questions of John. So I had Councillor Galloway, McGarry, then Lawrence.
Well, I'm glad they're going to be fluid, Mr. Chair, because I don't have any questions of...
okay, that's really fluid.
But I would certainly support the recommendation. This is a project that fits our mandate very, very clearly. Housing, public health, particularly as it relates to the Waterloo Region Integrated Drug Strategy. This speaks to one of the 4 pillars, a pillar that came up quite often during our CTS debates, where people said we weren't doing enough on the treatment and rehabilitation piece. This is a visible way that we can illustrate that we're supporting all the various pillars of RIDS, not just the harm reduction one that gets all the attention in the media and in the public's mind. This one fits very well, and for a relatively modest investment, we're getting a tremendous facility in the region that's going to serve us very, very well. I'm so glad that John and the House of Friendship Board decided to expand the project, and of course has been tremendously successful in the campaign. And I took in one of the presentations one time on the social bond, and I want to congratulate you on doing that as well, John. That's a novel, an innovative, creative way of financing. Has to be paid back, of course, over time, but at a very reasonable rate. And so I think the community has certainly supported this project, and for a relatively small investment, we can support it as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Galloway. Councillor McGarry?
Thank you very much. And John, this looks like a very different building from that first time you were in my former office a few years ago. And congratulations to you for managing the public expectations and sticking to what our mandate from the region really is all about. Welcome to Cambridge. We're very happy to have the footprint in a community that is rocked by the opioid crisis, as you're well aware, and this will go a long way in providing some of that comfort for the community that we really are about treatment services and looking at ways to expand it. So really my only question is, and boy, I'd like to see this replicated, when we were first talking, you had sort of a general idea of how many clients you could manage in one time. With the expansion with the second story, does this mean that you'll have more residential beds or more treatment or a bit of both?
Both. So it opens us up for future growth. The residential part is a license that we received from the province. So that hasn't changed. But if this new government, if they want to expand that, we could accommodate that overnight with the way we've built.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lawrence?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, John, for coming in, and I'm certainly very supportive of this initiative, and I think all the work that you do in the community, we're very fortunate to have you here. I noticed that you were talking about the expansion, and I'm wondering, are you calling that phase 2?
What do you mean by that?
Cambridge seems to be used to, every time we talk about any kind of something happening somewhere else, Carl raises the question about phase 2.
No.
It's a poor joke about LRT.
All right, I'll ignore that joke. I'm sure he's got something else for
And
me.
the hospital as well, yeah. So congratulations, and I'll certainly support this. I think it's a wonderful fit for what we do. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Shantz?
Thank you. I don't have questions, just thank you. My colleagues have articulated all the reasons that we thank you for the good work that you do, so definitely support the resolution.
Thank you.
Councillor Vanovic?
I do add my thanks. John, your organization does a heck of a lot of great work in the city of Kitchener and throughout the region, and I think this is just another logical step and one we must support going forward.
Thank you.
Okay, no other speakers. I also fully support it. Councillor Jowett, sorry. Go ahead.
So I'm out? Okay. So John, yes, I do support the recommendation, and thank you very much. I don't know if you remember the day I came to you very desperately and said, we need you in Cambridge so badly right now when the challenges around the shelter had commenced. I'm really glad that you've arrived, and I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing, and this solution, in spite of all of the complexities in our community, is very much warmly embraced by many. I know that, and I want you to feel that, so thank you.
So it's much needed service, fantastic to you and the innovative approach, the House of Friendship, to bring the service to our community, so I fully support it as well. So we're ready to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried unanimously with a conflict noted for Councillor Erb.
Can you indulge me for one more minute?
Sure.
I want to actually just say a thank you to this table. Thank you. You got me back to the slide. I don't know if I'll ever be invited back to a finance meeting, so I just want to take advantage of my time here. I wanted to say a heartfelt thank you to each of you around the horseshoe table. I think when we are going through a period like we are right now, my observation of many of you, what you've done, is really important. We need to keep doing that forward. So there's 3 things that I'm observing that each of you are doing, and I just want to encourage you. Number 1, I think particularly when we think about the opioid crisis and all the conversations that come with it, you've helped humanize it. And I think that's a first step, is that we have to humanize the issue. Otherwise, it leads to some not so great dynamics. I think my experience, particularly with this Cambridge, not just with regional councillors, but also municipal level leaders, have helped individuals understand the issues better in education. And I know that's a ton of work, and I know you get a lot of unpleasant phone calls. So I just want to thank you for the help. And the last, I want to leave you with this, the 3 H's: if humanize, help, and hope. If you want to treat an illness that has no easy cure, first of all, treat it with hope. We have to remain hopeful. And so why do I remain hopeful? It's because of past history. If you look at any other health issue, heart disease used to be our #1 killer. It's not anymore. Cancer, all those kind of issues. How do we deal with past health challenges that we didn't know what we were going to do with? Well, it starts simply. You start doing research, you start creating new treatments, you start evaluating those treatments, you innovate, you try, and then you keep doing that and you get really frustrated and you say, hey, why are we continuing to not address the symptoms? You start doing preventative work, and that's how you move forward on issues. And so if we could do that, with things like cancer, and we can do that with things like heart disease, we're going to do it with addiction. Yes, it's got more barriers. Yes, there's stigma. Yes, there's more challenges about it. But you know what? As a society, we're getting further along understanding that it is also an illness and that it needs to be treated that way. So let's stay hopeful. And as a small token of appreciation to you, I'm giving this book that just got released. It's called Dope Sick. It was written by a journalist from where the opioid crisis started in the Appalachian Valley. It's an exceptional book. I found it very helpful to kind of understand the issue. I'm going to leave it there at the table. You can fight amongst yourself, but it's just a small token of appreciation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Really appreciate those words. It is a very difficult issue that everyone in the community is doing the best we can to deal with, so appreciate that. Okay, moving on with the agenda, consent agenda. Mover and seconder, Councillor Jaworski, Councillor Galloway, all those in favor? That's carried. Okay, great. Thanks. The next one's a corporate energy plan. We did have a staff presentation, but we're running behind and staff has graciously agreed to forego that. We may invite them back to another meeting. I think it would be good for us to learn more about that. So there's a recommendation there. Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Foxton, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Community Innovation Grant Program, any questions on that? It's pretty straightforward. 3 priority areas. A mover, Councillor Jaworski, Councillor Kiefer, all those in favor? That's carried. Gas tax funding, that's a nice windfall that we're going to use to reduce our borrowing costs. Moved by Councillor Redmond, seconded by Councillor Nowak. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay. And I think the next one's on capping. Is it? No, I'm looking at 2 agendas. Provincial funding update, are we there? All right, so this is the late starter, and one of the reasons why we need to shuffle the agenda around a little bit more. Mr. Dyer has a presentation, and there's a report submitted, I believe, on our desks today under the consolidated agenda about the impacts of some of the provincial announcements. So thought this was important for us to spend some time on. Mr. Dyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have a brief presentation for you today to go along with the report that was distributed in the consolidated agenda. Since the provincial budget was released back on April the 11th, there has been a number of announcements and releases of additional information that's happened since that time that is starting to shed a little bit of light on what the implications for municipalities might be over the course of this year and as we head into the next couple of years. I would start off just by saying that you can consider this as here's what we know right now based on very little information kind of report. We've done our best to assess what we believe the impacts to be based on, again, based on a fairly small amount of information that we've received. But we've done our best to just kind of assess where we're at overall, and it seemed like an appropriate time to update A&F committee on some of these implications, recognizing that there will be further reports to come on individual matters to this committee, to community services, and to planning and works as we learn more about some of the changes that are happening. So there's a couple of areas we want to focus on today. I'm certainly not going to go through the entire report. There are kind of 3 main areas we want to focus on today. One relates to childcare, one relates to housing, and one relates to public health. And there's a couple of other issues that we'll just talk about very briefly. We've tried to go through all of these in the report. And so just kind of at a high level, for housing, we're going to report on some new funding programs that were announced by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing just after the budget. On public health, there's been a fair bit of media coverage about this, particularly in Toronto, between the ministry and the Toronto Board of Health. But what we know is that we will have additional costs. We, the region, municipalities, will have additional costs to bear as of April the 1st, this past April the 1st. Similarly with children's services, the funding responsibilities and ratios are being changed, again, going back to April the 1st. I've got a slide on the universal bus pass. This is a follow-up to the conversation you may recall that we had during the budget, and based on an announcement that had originally made back in the beginning of January, so we have an update there. A couple of other items that won't go into any great detail. There has been a reduction to the Natural Hazard Management Grant received by the GRCA. We understand that they're going to be able to manage that reduction through 2019 without an additional municipal levy. It's not clear yet what impact that will have in 2020. And police are reviewing the consolidation of a number of grant programs and the replacement of a number of grant programs with a community, I think it's called a community safety policing grant, and staff will report back to the Police Services Board in due course. I'm going to start with housing, and most of what's in here are just kind of excerpts from the report. So what we learned through the announcement on the housing side is that the funding for the community housing prevention initiative, so this is the CHIPPY program, will actually be a little bit lower. So the column I'm focused on here is that 2019 variance column, about in the middle, just to the right of the middle of this page. It's about $300,000 to $400,000 less than we had budgeted. So staff are looking at that, and we'll report back with how we'll adjust our spending to manage that relatively minor reduction. What has been announced are two new programs, the Canada-Ontario Community Housing Initiative and the Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative program, which in total, as we understand it, will result in about an additional $3.3 million to be made available. We understand at this point that it doesn't require any municipal matching, so it's basically 100% provincial funding. And staff will be, again, as we get more details, staff will be putting together a plan as to how that funding will be invested in 2019 and in 2020 and future years as well. So you can expect to see a report on that one to the Community Services Committee later this spring. But I would say this is maybe the small bit of good news that we've received so far since the budget was announced. With respect to public health, a very different story. So public health programs have traditionally been funded 75% by the ministry and 25% by municipalities, and there also are a number of 100% provincially funded programs. As of the 1st of this month, municipalities will be responsible for 30% of all those programs. So we go from 25 to 30 on cost-shared programs. We go from 0% to 30 on previously 100% funded programs. So in terms of implications, again, if you look at that 2019 variance column at the top, we've estimated a $1.7 million impact in 2019. And this is mostly because the province works off their fiscal year, which is April 1st to March 31st. Our fiscal year is the calendar year. So we have 9 months of the impact felt this year and the remaining $600,000 next year. So in total, in the far right-hand column up at the top, that change is a $2.3 million funding impact to the region. When we look ahead a couple of more years, the intent is in 2021 to then move to a 60-40 split for regions with a population greater than 1 million. And so small R region here, as you'll recall from the budget report, the province has announced its intent to move from 35 public health boards to 10. It's not clear to us yet exactly what geography those 10 regions will cover, nor do we understand what the governance model will be. We have a better idea now what the funding model will be, and that will be increased municipal funding. So on the assumption that the region will be part of a broader region that has a population of at least $1 million, the overall impacts are shown at the bottom of this slide, totaling just over $5 million by the time we get to 2022.
So again, we go from 75-25 to 70-30. We go from 100% to 30%. That'll be in effect for 2 years. And then as of 2021, we anticipate moving to a 40% municipal funding responsibility for public health programs. Children's Services. Children's Services has been a little trickier to figure out. There was nothing specifically announced in the budget, other than we could see from, I think, one of the ministry funding allocations that there were some changing in overall spending. We learned just before Easter weekend of how that's going to play out, and it's going to play out in two different ways. The first is that funding for a portion of the childcare program, what they refer to as the expansion plan funding, which had been, this is funding that had been provided to municipalities over a series of years by the previous government at 100% provincial funding, is now going to be cost shared on an 80-20 basis. So we have to start picking up 20% of those costs as of April 1st of this year. In addition, on the administration side, the province has typically allowed 10% for administration costs. And again, in these particular cases, funded 100% by the ministry. The 10% is changing to 5%, and that 5% now has to be cost shared on a 50-50 basis. And so the cumulative impact of those changes, again, based on our interpretation of the limited information we have right now, is that that's a $4 million impact between 2019 and 2020. $3 million this year and another $1 million next year. We understand that there's additional information that's going to be provided in the form of guidelines from the ministry. This is on the childcare side. That information is expected sometime in May. And once we have that information, we'll be able to take a closer look and determine whether the figures that we're anticipating right now are accurate. Our hope is that these numbers on slide 7 represent a worst-case scenario. We know that the region is one of the areas that is already providing more than the minimum that's required. So you may recall we've had this conversation over at least a couple of budget cycles now. The minimum regional funding requirement is in the $5 to $5.5 million range. We're currently providing about $3.5 million in excess of that. And so there may be the possibility that through some reprofiling of the additional money that we're already providing, that the impact may not be as high as what we're showing here, but we're going to have to wait and see what those guidelines look like. Based on our read of the material right now, this is the potential impact to the region with respect to childcare funding. So not so much a funding issue as it is I guess a policy issue, and certainly a budget issue for the region. The universal transit passes, the province has now clarified its approach and its intent through the Student Choice Initiative, and that is that if a universal transit pass agreement was in place prior to January 17th of 2019, then that arrangement can continue. And so based on that, our understanding is that the current arrangements we have with both the University of Waterloo and Wilfrid Laurier can continue, but that we will not be able to enter into a universal transit pass arrangement with Conestoga College because a formal agreement was not in place as of January 17th when they first announced this student choice initiative. So staff are looking at this. You'll recall that in the 2019 budget, Council did approve the budget issue paper for the Conestoga College UPass, which has both operating and capital implications. We're going to be looking at that, and you can anticipate a follow-up report coming to the Planning and Works Committee on May 28th. And so overall, our read right now on the property tax impact of the announcements relating to public health and children's services is approximately $4.7 million in 2019. So almost a full percent. And again, that's partly because these changes go back to April 1st of this year. And so we have to find, basically 9/12 of that change in a budget for a fiscal year that we're already 4 months through. If we take it out through the remaining years, particularly on the public health side, we've estimated the overall impact for these two programs at about $9.4 million between now and 2022. On top of that, there are a number of services that we have yet to receive a direction on since the budget was announced back on the 11th of April. That includes funding for Ontario Works Administration. We receive funding from the province on a per diem basis for our operations at Sunnyside, discretionary benefits, paramedic services. We understand the intent to move from either 52 or 59 emergency services operators in the province down to 10. That's about all we know at this point. We haven't had any formal confirmation on what is an existing 50-50 cost-sharing relationship. We also receive a small amount of funding for a museum, which we haven't heard. Library could be on here. You may have heard that there's been some reductions to the Southern Ontario Library Services and its northern counterpart. The understanding is that's where the library changes are going to be focused in 2019, although we haven't had official confirmation. We do receive somewhere between $90,000 and $100,000 in the form of a library grant. So we'll be needing confirmation on that one as well. So in terms of next steps, again, there's a lot of additional information we're hoping to get over the next few weeks to be able to verify our initial estimates of these impacts. We'll also be looking at options and recommendations to deal with the impact both in 2019 and as we head into the 2020 budget. As I'm sure you can appreciate, finding $5 million when we're almost halfway through the year is going to be a challenge, and that's something that we'll work on. And I think it's reasonable to anticipate separate reports coming to committees on each of these issues as we get a better understanding and as our plans develop for how we might deal with the changes. And Mr. Chair, that's my presentation on the report, and there's a variety of staff here who would be happy to answer any questions.
I'm not sure if happy is the right word for that report, but it is what it is, and we kind of expected this based on the last election, that's for sure. Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you, through the chair. I certainly don't want to interrupt Mr. Dyer because he hasn't gotten to the good news yet. So I'm still waiting for that. But
we'll keep looking for it.
Yeah, to Craig, on the with the funding model, the percentage funding model, is staff giving consideration to looking at an option to say, what if we were to stay within our envelope? I'm certainly not suggesting that we do that, but what would need to be done operationally if we were to live inside this envelope, just as an example to our council here of what these impacts are really doing, and to all citizens really, of how these are, it's, quote, small matter of money, but these are significant impacts to very important projects, including discretionary benefits and that coming up. So I was wondering if you've given thought to that, or it would be too much of an effort to go through that estimation, which is something I don't think this council's interested in. We're interested in maintaining services.
Right. It's certainly not too much of an effort, and we have contemplated it, and I'll ask Mr. Murray to respond.
Yeah, so maybe just a couple of comments. So yes, we need to look at the whole range of options, and that's the work that staff are doing right now, in particular in public health and in children's services. Given the information that we've got, I think, there's a range of options available to the region in terms of how we deal with these, either funding reductions or change in cost shared ratio. And so yeah, we're going to explore that, trying to report back at the next committee meeting. There may very well be a caucus report and an open report, because there may be things that council needs to deal with in caucus.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jowett.
Thank you, through the chair. I appreciate your indulgence, especially because I'm holding us between our lunch. Just quickly, Craig, when you talk about this Conestoga College UPass, I'm a little bit frustrated because it feels like it's been back and forthing. So when I sat on the board, it was very critical to them at the time that they be a part of the UPass group because of the universities. And so are we just seeing these changes based on the student leadership, or can you give me any insights as to what the challenge might be there?
So through you, Mr. Chair, certainly the notification that we received, actually that the regional chair received from the minister, which is appended to the end of the to the report, is the clarification that was needed. It was obviously not the clarification we were hoping for, but we did need them to clarify exactly what their position was going to be. My sense is that, there was great interest in this UPass from both the students and obviously an interest from council in making this happen. And I think one of the things that we'll report back on is what options then do we have in terms of providing the service that's necessary and appropriate to the college, and how those, and how the students would then access that service as well. And I'm assuming it's reverting back to a student pass as opposed to a universal pass that everyone would pay for through their tuition. But again, you can anticipate those options to come back at the next Planning and Works Committee.
Okay, much appreciated.
Okay, any further questions for Mr. Dyer? Okay, with that, Councillor Lawrence? Comment? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I think, one of the things that this council stands by is accountability. And I think it's up to us to make sure that the sitting members of the Government of Ontario that represent the citizens of the region of Waterloo have some accountability on these cuts. And I would request that the regional chair send a letter off. I was going to say invite, but I think it's more requesting those members to come in and explain to us why these cuts are taking place and how they expect us to pay for the shortfall on these. To me, this is, I've been through this before with other governments. I think the previous government was on track. We had thought we got rid of all this downloading, and this is just a simple case of downloading again by a government that is for the people. So I'm a little concerned about that. I think we need to have them come in, we need to ask them questions, and we need to hold them accountable, just like we're held accountable.
Chair Edmund.
Thank you, Chair Strickland. Just for council's benefit, there are many municipalities, both local tier and regional councils, that are reeling with these unfolding, evolving announcements as we are. It's something that Marco, that Lumco and AMO are all responding to the government, and I'd be happy to take that concern forward. But we feel that united voices are probably stronger than individual ones. So if council will bear with me, I will correspond with the Premier and the ministers who are relevant to the cutbacks and the changes, recognizing that a lot of these changes are more than money. There are financial implications, but these are foundational structural changes. And I don't think anybody knows how the way forward is going to unfold, but certainly we're putting forward our concerns, and AMO as well. I just got a note from Carl that I missed AMO, but all of those organizations are trying to unite in one voice to ask for clarity and consultation as we go forward because of unintended consequences to the people we represent and the services that we provide.
Councillor Lawrence.
Well, I have no problem with that, but my point is there should be a price to pay for putting your hand up like sheep and just going along with what the leader or what the cabinet wants. And I think I'd like to have these members come in and explain to us. I mean, they need to be held accountable, and people in this community need to hear from them. They really have no other forum to do that. And I think it behooves us not to have them come in and explain their position, and they represent the same people that we do. And that's my point. I mean, if we want to wait to do that, I have no problem with that. But, you know, people in this community have no problem holding me accountable when we make decisions that they don't like. And I think these provincial members that represent the region should feel the same.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess, Craig, just in terms of a comment and a question is, I have a couple of concerns. One is, as Chair Redmond alluded to, is how the program structure is being changed around fundamental funding arrangements that have been in place for quite a long period of time. And not only that, my concern is how we're finding out about them. it's buried in this omnibus bill, and it's just coming out incrementally and incrementally. And so my concern really is about transparency. If you're going to make cuts to public health, tell us what the cuts are rather than for us to have to go dig in the budget and find out what the implications are. So that really is my concern. And if I understand your report, we're looking at a minimum, notwithstanding any potential program changes that we may do internally, minimum of a 1% tax increase onto our base for 2019, and then beyond up to 2%. That's at a minimum, because we don't know on those 5 other program areas that you identified what changes will be there. My question is, do you anticipate, based on your conversations with the province, that we will have all the information we need in terms of these cuts when we start our 2020 budget process in October?
I would probably say no. I don't think we will. I think, I'll try this. I think public health is reasonably clearly mapped out at this point what the plan is over the next couple of years. The Children's Services announcement was a 1-year announcement, and there's indications that the funding formula and cost sharing may change again next year. Similarly, with an item, for example, such as the provincial gas tax funding, which is referenced in the report, we've received a notification for the 2019 number, right, which is about $10.5 million. There's also language in the budget that says the parameters of the provincial gas tax transfer program are being reviewed. So I think we absolutely, at this point, do not have the full picture of what the impact will be potentially in 2020. It's becoming a bit clearer on a couple of them. But again, we do need to get much more information, particularly on the children's services piece. And if I may, Mr. Chair, one of the comments I've made in the concluding remarks of the report, what's making this particularly challenging is that it's the end of April, right? The budget has been set, tax rates have been set. We're 4 months into the year. It'll be a good 6 to 8 weeks, I think, before we have a really good grasp of what all these implications are, and we'll be halfway through the year and needing to find, needing to put a plan in place to deal with reductions of this magnitude. And if I may offer one more point to Councillor Jaworski's earlier comment, in terms of doing the calculations, if we look at the public health number, $1.7 million of property tax, so net property tax impact in 2019 on a 30% funded program is $6 million of reductions. Right? This is net property tax impact, and we're only paying 30%. And so if you want to achieve $1.7 million of savings in year, that's $6 million of spending reductions. So that's the challenge that we're going to be trying to understand and figure out over, I would say, over the next couple of months, so we can bring some type of strategy back to council.
Well, thanks for that, Craig. And that really does put a finer point on the scope and size of the issues that we're going to be dealing with going into the next budget. And I guess to Chair Redmond, through you to maybe Amo and others with respect to the letter and communication, I don't necessarily agree with the government's direction on these fronts, but they are the elected government, and all I would say is just give us the information, get it to us so we can deal with it. We may not want, we're not going to like dealing with it, but they need to get the information to us so we can plan accordingly. I mean, I think that's the biggest challenge that we're going to have to face going forward. So thanks very much for bringing that forward today, Craig. Yeah, Councillor Urbanovic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just very briefly, and I think a lot of important comments have been made, and further to Chair Redmond's comments, I know that LUMCO is also working on a letter because it's been getting circulated today from the large urban mayors caucus, touching on a variety of issues. But I think one of the messages that I think really needs to be understood here, and that we need to convey out publicly is, the provincial government is talking about, moving towards balancing their books. But the way of balancing one's books is not by simply forcing somebody else to cover that deficit by essentially either cutting services or forcing us to raise taxes. And I think that is something that needs to be kept in mind as we have these discussions going forward. The reality is a lot more is going to be achieved in terms of long-term structural change if they work collaboratively with us, so that we can, jointly achieve the goals that people are looking for. I mean, we all know that the provincial government needed to, at some point, get their budget in balance and start paying down debt. Nobody's questioning that. But the process is the issue that everybody is having concerns with now.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Ranovic. All right, good discussion. Thanks again, Mr. Dyer. Moving along with the agenda, information, correspondence, council inquiries, other business. Councillor Harris?
Yes, I do have a councillor inquiry. Speaking of additional costs, I know that the federal government has obviously have instituted a carbon tax starting April 1st. I'm wondering if staff at a future date can report back on what that additional cost will be to the region in this fiscal year. And that would include police, regional, EMS, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if that'll be included as a line item in the budget next fiscal year, but I am curious to know what that additional cost would be to the region as a line item. Mm-hmm. And then we did skip on the consent agenda item. I did have a comment, I suppose, on the DC review. I've got a question. It is an aggressive timetable, and I'm wondering, in that chart, the expected completion date, stakeholder meetings April, May, I'm wondering, has there been any stakeholder meetings since the draft bylaw to the public was released April 23rd? I'm wondering if somebody can answer that.
Okay, so two questions, carbon tax and DC bylaw review.
Right, so through you, Mr. Chair, carbon tax, no problem. We'll take a look at that and bring an information report back to committee. With respect to development charges, we've had a couple of meetings so far with our stakeholder group. One happened prior to the release of the background study. One happened subsequent to the release of the background study. And we have a third meeting, I can't remember what the date is. Sometime in May, we'll be meeting with that group again. And I would say those have been interesting and engaging conversations, and we've got lots of, we've had a wide range of feedback, but I think that it's absolutely been a good use of time, and we're going to work with that group to meet with them at least once more before the process ends.
Yeah, I'm assuming that we've all heard some feedback since that April 23rd public report. I will say that I've had a brief opportunity to get through the 301-page background study by Watson and Associates and another 174-page regional report. And I encourage everyone ahead of next week's public meeting to dive into that. Obviously, there is a balance between those two competing realities, the barrier to increased economic activity, and then, of course, the capital required to, fund and ensure the necessary infrastructure. But I would, premise my comments now that I am significantly, concerned about the rate increase and the rapid pace of which we are, in fact, proposing significant increases in our development charges, the harmonization or blending of the rates, especially at I would say, still in an economic uncertain time, and especially from our residential perspective, on a barrier for new families to access the housing market, that this hopefully will have a robust conversation of council, that this is a significant increase, which has perhaps garnered some unwanted attention, across the province, if not even further, by the region. So I just want to state that on the record and look forward to the public meeting next week and further consultation as we go forward with this review.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Harris. It is a big and very important issue that we have a process outlined that will continue with that process. And I do know, speaking from the committee that is struck to look at this, that staff are pretty good at reaching out and having conversations with those stakeholder groups. So that work is occurring and will occur right up until the bylaws finalized. All right, so no other items, next meeting. Now, I know we want to adjourn. We're real late for lunch, but there is a special council meeting we need to deal with, which should take about 2 seconds for debenture. And then we'll adjourn and have a chance to get a little refreshed. So motion to adjourn, A&F. Councillor Fox and Councillor Jaworski, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Chair Redmond, it's all yours.
But have they always gone to the blending of the rates? Like that's something new.
I'm not so sure.
That increases the industrial rate by like over 160%.
So with your indulgence, I will call the special council meeting to order and ask if there's any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, motion to go into the committee of a whole moved by, I say Senator, Councillor Foxton, seconded by Councillor Jaworski. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Financial report, it's on regional debentures. Mr. Dyer, do you want to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to say that on the agenda today is the information report and the bylaws that are needed for council to approve in order to complete this debenture issue, which was launched back on April 17th. The borrowing was just over $40 million for 4 or 5 regional projects. And I think importantly, over 20 years, achieved an all-in cost of borrowing of 3.02%, which for, I think, 20-year money is a terrific rate. We're really pleased with how the issue went. And what's remaining is for the bylaws to be approved today and some paperwork to be done, and the deal will close on Friday.
Excellent. So I feel we have our wind at our back. Could I have a motion for the Committee of Whole to rise and council to resume? Moved by Councillor Sean, seconded by Councillor Nowak. All those in favor? That is carried. A motion to adopt the proceedings of the Committee of the Whole, moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Jowett. All those in favor? That is carried. Is there any other business? I would entertain a motion to enact the bylaws of first, second, and third readings, seconded by, excuse me, Councillor Kiefer, moved by Councillor Kiefer, seconded by Councillor Vrvanovich. All those in favor? That is carried. That bylaw also confirmed the actions of Council of April 30th, as written. A motion to go into closed session, moved by Councillor Sean, seconded by Councillor McGarry. All those in favor? That is carried.